Rebecca fumbled with her boarding pass as she tried to balance her 8-month-old son on her hip. The gate agent had already called her row twice, and she could feel dozens of eyes watching her struggle with the diaper bag, her purse, and little Daniel. Her hands were shaking slightly as she made her way down the narrow airplane aisle, bumping into seat corners and muttering apologies to everyone she passed. She had been dreading this flight for weeks. Flying alone with a baby felt like preparing for battle, and she had spent the night before packing and repacking, making sure she had everything Daniel might possibly need: extra diapers, wipes, 3 changes of clothes, his favorite pacifier plus 2 backups, bottles, formula, toys, teething rings, and a blanket that smelled like home. Her sister's wedding in Denver was important, but right now, standing in this cramped airplane aisle with passengers staring at her, Rebecca wondered if she should have just stayed home. "Excuse me, that's my seat," a woman said impatiently, gesturing toward the window seat Rebecca was blocking. "Sorry, so sorry," Rebecca mumbled, trying to squeeze herself and Daniel against the seats to let the woman pass. Daniel started fussing, that pre-cry whimper that every mother knows means trouble is coming. Finally, she collapsed into her seat near the back of the plane, right by the bathroom. She had specifically requested this seat, thinking the noise from the lavatory might actually help mask any crying Daniel might do. Now she realized it just meant more people would be walking past them, bumping their seat and giving her dirty looks if Daniel made a sound. The plane was packed. Every single seat was filled, and the overhead bins were stuffed to capacity. Rebecca had barely managed to squeeze her diaper bag under the seat in front of her, which meant her legs were cramped and uncomfortable. She could already tell this was going to be a long 4 hours. Daniel seemed okay during takeoff. He nursed a little, and Rebecca felt a flutter of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this would be fine. Maybe he would sleep the whole way. Maybe all her worrying had been for nothing. That hope lasted about 20 minutes. As the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Daniel started to cry. Not the usual fussy cry Rebecca was used to. This was different. This was a sharp, piercing wail that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. His little face scrunched up and turned red, and no matter what Rebecca did, the crying just got louder. She tried nursing him again, but he turned his head away and screamed harder. She tried the pacifier. He spit it out. She tried bouncing him gently on her knee, making shushing sounds, singing softly. Nothing worked. If anything, he seemed to be getting more upset. "It's okay, baby, it's okay," Rebecca whispered, but her own voice was starting to crack. She could feel panic rising in her chest. Other passengers were starting to turn around in their seats, craning their necks to see where the noise was coming from. Rebecca stood up and started walking up and down the narrow aisle, patting Daniel's back and swaying back and forth. She had read somewhere that the motion sometimes helped babies calm down, but Daniel wasn't having it. His cries echoed through the cabin, impossible to ignore. A flight attendant approached with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" "I don't know what's wrong," Rebecca said, and she could hear the desperation in her own voice. "He won't stop crying. I think maybe his ears are bothering him from the pressure. I've tried everything. Maybe try giving him something to drink. That can help with the ear pressure," the attendant suggested, though her tone made it clear she was just going through the motions. Rebecca had already tried that, twice. She made her way back to her seat, aware of every single person watching her. A man in a business suit was staring at her with obvious annoyance. An older couple a few rows up were whispering to each other and shaking their heads. She caught the words, "some people," and "shouldn't travel with babies," and felt her face burn with shame. Rebecca tried the bottle again. Daniel knocked it away with his tiny fist, and formula splashed onto her jeans. The crying continued, relentless and piercing. She checked his diaper. Clean. She felt his forehead. No fever. She couldn't figure out what was wrong, and that made everything so much worse. Tears started rolling down Rebecca's cheeks. She couldn't help it. She felt like the worst mother in the world. Everyone on this plane probably thought she was incompetent, that she couldn't even calm her own baby. Maybe they were right. Maybe she shouldn't have attempted this trip. Maybe she was being selfish, putting all these people through this torture just so she could attend her sister's wedding. Daniel's crying had been going on for almost an hour now. Rebecca's arms ached from holding him, and her head was pounding. She had tried walking the aisles 3 more times, but each time someone gave her a look that made her feel about 2 inches tall, she retreated back to her seat. The businessman with the laptop finally slammed it shut with an exaggerated sigh, loud enough for half the plane to hear. A teenage boy put his headphones on and turned the volume up so high Rebecca could hear the music from where she sat. The older woman who had been whispering earlier actually turned around in her seat to glare directly at Rebecca. "Some mothers just don't know how to handle their children," the woman said to her husband, but loud enough that Rebecca definitely heard it. That comment broke something inside Rebecca. She hunched over Daniel, letting her hair fall forward to hide her face, and sobbed silently while her baby screamed. She felt completely alone, trapped in this metal tube thousands of feet in the air, with nowhere to go and no way to make things better. She had never felt like more of a failure in her entire life. All she wanted was to disappear, to somehow make herself and Daniel invisible so these people would stop staring, stop judging, stop making her feel like she was ruining everyone's day just by existing. The flight still had 3 more hours to go. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every time Daniel's cries would briefly pause for a breath, Rebecca could feel the collective hope from the other passengers. And then when he started up again, even louder than before, she could practically feel their frustration radiating toward her in waves. A businessman in seat 12C had his jaw clenched so tight Rebecca thought his teeth might crack. He kept checking his watch every few minutes and typing aggressively on his phone. She caught a glimpse of his screen once when she walked past. He was texting someone about how his flight was being ruined by some screaming kid. The words stung, even though she was only seeing them from the corner of her eye. She noticed he had noise-canceling headphones sitting on the tray table in front of him. Expensive ones. But he wasn't wearing them. Instead, he seemed to be making a point of showing everyone around him just how annoyed he was. He would sigh dramatically, shake his head, and make eye contact with other passengers as if to say, "Can you believe this?" Rebecca wanted to scream at him. She wanted to tell him that she was doing everything she possibly could, that she hadn't gotten on this plane planning to torture everyone, that she felt worse about this situation than he could ever imagine. But she didn't say anything. She just kept bouncing Daniel and wiping away her own tears. 2 rows ahead of the businessman, an elderly woman named Margaret was having her own conversation with her husband. She wasn't even trying to whisper anymore. "In my day, mothers knew how to handle their babies," she said, her voice carrying easily over the sound of Daniel's crying. "You didn't see this kind of thing happening on flights back then. People had more consideration for others." Her husband nodded along, though he looked less convinced. "Now, Martha, the baby might be in pain. Ear pressure can be difficult for little ones." "Nonsense," Martha continued, waving her hand dismissively. "That mother clearly doesn't know what she's doing. Look at her. She's barely older than a child herself. Probably one of those young mothers who thinks they can do everything and ends up doing nothing right." Rebecca heard every word. Each one felt like a small knife. She was 28 years old, not that it mattered. Even if she had been 18 or 48, nothing would have changed the fact that her baby was in distress and she couldn't help him. A flight attendant named Patricia walked down the aisle with a cart of drinks. She had been flying for 15 years and had seen countless crying babies. But something about this situation was different. The judgment from the other passengers was unusually harsh today. Maybe it was because the flight was so full, or maybe people were just having bad days. Either way, she felt sorry for the young mother. "Can I get you anything?" Patricia asked Rebecca, trying to sound kind. "No, thank you," Rebecca managed to say between Daniel's screams. "I'm so sorry about this. I don't know what else to do." Patricia wanted to offer real help, but she had 100 other passengers to serve, and her supervisor was already giving her looks about taking too long. "Just keep trying," she said, which she immediately realized was completely unhelpful advice. The mother was obviously trying. As Patricia moved down the aisle, she noticed several passengers flagging her down. "Is there anything you can do about that baby?" asked a woman in a sleek business dress. "I have an important presentation tomorrow, and I really need to review my notes. I can't concentrate with all this noise." "I'm so sorry for the disturbance," Patricia said, falling back on her training. "The mother is doing her best to soothe the infant." "Well, her best isn't good enough," the woman snapped. "Isn't there a rule about this? Can't you move them to a different section or something?" Patricia felt her patience wearing thin. "The flight is completely full, ma'am. there's nowhere to move them to. And no, there's no rule against babies crying on airplanes. 3 rows back, a young couple was having their own discussion. They had been planning to watch a movie together on their shared iPad, but they couldn't hear anything over Daniel's crying. "This is ridiculous," the boyfriend muttered. "Why do people bring babies on planes? Can't they just drive or take a train or something?" His girlfriend was slightly more sympathetic. "Maybe it's an emergency. Maybe she has to be somewhere." "I don't care what her reason is," he replied, raising his voice slightly. "The rest of us paid for our tickets too. We shouldn't have to suffer through this." The girlfriend pulled out her phone and started typing. Moments later, she was posting on social media about the nightmare flight she was on, complete with complaints about inconsiderate parents. She didn't post any photos or videos, but her description was detailed enough that anyone reading it would side with her immediately. Near the front of the plane, a man in his 30s stood up and approached the flight attendant station. He asked if it was possible to switch seats, saying he had an important call to make when they landed and needed to prepare in a quiet environment. The real reason, of course, was that he simply didn't want to listen to a baby cry anymore. "I'm sorry, sir, but the flight is entirely full," Patricia explained for what felt like the 100th time. "Every seat is taken." "Fine," he said curtly and walked back to his seat, making sure to give Rebecca a pointed look as he passed her row. Rebecca saw the look. She saw all the looks. Every glance, every whisper, every shake of the head. She felt them all like physical blows. Daniel was still screaming in her arms, his little face red and wet with tears. She had been changing his position constantly, trying to find some way to hold him that might be more comfortable. Her arms felt like they were on fire from the effort. She tried singing to him again, a lullaby her own mother used to sing to her. But her voice came out shaky and broken, and Daniel didn't respond at all. If anything, her distress seemed to be making him more upset. The bathroom door near her seat kept opening and closing as passengers used it throughout the flight. Each time it opened, someone would come out, see Rebecca with her crying baby, and give her either a look of pity or annoyance. She wasn't sure which was worse. A teenage girl passed by wearing bright purple headphones. Her music turned up so loud Rebecca could hear the bass from where she sat. The girl didn't even glance at her, just walked past like Rebecca and Daniel didn't exist. Rebecca almost envied her ability to tune out the world. At one point, Daniel's crying reached such a pitch that even the pilots heard it in the cockpit. The captain and first officer exchanged glances. "That's an unhappy baby," the first officer commented. "Poor mother," the captain replied. "I remember when mine were that age. It's not easy." But the passengers didn't share that sympathy. As Daniel's crying continued into the second hour with no signs of stopping, the atmosphere in the cabin grew darker. People stopped being subtle about their frustration. Comments were made at normal volume now. Eyes rolled openly. A few passengers even started complaining loudly to each other about how this flight was the worst one they'd ever been on. Rebecca pulled Daniel closer to her chest and closed her eyes. She couldn't look at anyone anymore. She couldn't handle one more judgmental stare or whispered comment. All she could do was hold her baby and pray that somehow, some way, this nightmare would end. 3 rows behind Rebecca and her crying baby, a little girl named Lily had been watching everything unfold with growing concern. She was 7 years old, wearing a bright yellow dress covered in small daisies, and her dark hair was pulled back into 2 neat braids tied with white ribbons. Unlike every other passenger on the plane, Lily didn't look annoyed or frustrated. She looked worried. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging on her father's sleeve. "That baby has been crying for a really long time." Her father, David, glanced up from the medical journal he'd been trying to read. He was a pediatrician at a children's hospital in Boston, and he had been paying attention to the situation as well, though with more clinical interest. He'd been mentally running through possible causes for the infant's distress. Ear pressure, reflux, overtiredness, overstimulation. "Could be any number of things, I know, sweetheart," he said gently. "The little one is having a hard time. The mommy looks really sad," Lily continued, her voice full of genuine concern. "She's crying too. Can we help them?" David looked at his daughter with that mixture of pride and tenderness that fathers often feel when their children show compassion. Lily had always been like this, even when she was tiny. She couldn't walk past someone who was hurting without wanting to make it better. It was one of the things he loved most about her. "What did you have in mind?" he asked. Lily unbuckled her seatbelt and started to stand up, but David gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hold on a second, honey. We should probably ask first if they want help. The mother might not want strangers approaching her baby right now." Lily thought about this for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but Daddy, I think I can help. Remember how I always make baby Tyler stop crying at the hospital?" David did remember. His daughter volunteered with him sometimes at the pediatric clinic, and she had a natural gift with children, especially babies. There was something about her gentle presence that seemed to calm even the fussiest infants. The nurses had started calling her their secret weapon. "I remember," David said, smiling. "But let's be respectful. That mother is probably feeling overwhelmed right now." "That's why we should help," Lily insisted, her 7-year-old logic simple and pure. "When people are overwhelmed, that's when they need help the most. That's what Mommy always says." David felt a pang in his chest at the mention of his late wife. She had passed away 2 years ago, and Lily still quoted her wisdom regularly. She was right, of course. His wife would have been the first person to help that struggling mother. "Okay," he said, making a decision. "But we approach gently, and if she says no, we respect that and come right back to our seats." "Understood?" "Understood," Lily said seriously, already reaching for her small backpack under the seat in front of her. David watched as his daughter carefully pulled out a small stuffed rabbit that was showing signs of wear from years of love. It had been her comfort toy since she was 2 years old, and the fact that she was willing to share it showed just how deeply she cared about helping. She also pulled out a small light-up toy, the kind that played gentle music and projected colorful patterns. David had bought it for her to use on the plane, thinking it might keep her entertained during the flight. Instead, she wanted to give it to a baby she'd never met. "You're sure you want to share your things?" David asked. Lily looked at him like he'd asked the silliest question in the world. "Daddy, I'm 7. I don't need these anymore. But that baby does." And with that, she started making her way down the aisle. Several passengers watched her go, probably wondering what this little girl was up to. The businessman who'd been so irritated earlier actually looked curious. The elderly woman Martha watched with raised eyebrows, clearly skeptical that a child could accomplish what an adult couldn't. Lily walked carefully, holding onto the seats to keep her balance as the plane hit a small patch of turbulence. When she reached Rebecca's row, she stopped and stood there for a moment, watching the exhausted mother try desperately to calm her screaming baby. Rebecca didn't notice her at first. She was too focused on Daniel, too lost in her own misery and exhaustion. But then she felt a gentle tap on her arm. She looked down and saw a little girl standing there, looking up at her with the kindest brown eyes Rebecca had ever seen. There was no judgment in those eyes, no frustration or annoyance, just pure, genuine concern. "Excuse me," Lily said softly, her voice somehow cutting through even Daniel's screaming. "My name is Lily. May I try to help?" Rebecca was so surprised she almost couldn't speak. In the past 2 hours, dozens of people had walked past her. Some had stared, some had glared, some had muttered complaints. But not a single person had offered to help. "Not one. Rebecca started, then stopped. She looked at this little girl in her yellow dress, holding a stuffed rabbit and a light-up toy, and something inside her chest loosened just slightly. "You want to help?" "Yes, please," Lily said politely. "If that's okay with you. I'm really good with babies. My daddy is a doctor for children, and I help him sometimes." Rebecca glanced past Lily and saw a kind-looking man a few rows back, giving her an encouraging nod. He mouthed the words pediatrician and pointed to himself, as if to assure her that this wasn't some strange situation. Rebecca looked back at Lily. The little girl was waiting patiently, not pushing, not demanding, just offering. And Rebecca realized she had absolutely nothing to lose. Nothing she had tried was working anyway. "Okay," Rebecca said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Yes, please. I don't know what else to do." Lily's face lit up with a smile that somehow made Rebecca feel like maybe, just maybe, things might be okay. "May I sit next to you?" "Of course," Rebecca said, shifting over slightly to make room. The woman in the window seat had been pretending to sleep for the past hour, probably trying to escape the sound of Daniel's crying, but she opened her eyes and moved her legs to let Lily through. Lily climbed carefully into the middle seat, placing her backpack on her lap. She didn't immediately reach for Daniel. Instead, she just sat there quietly for a moment, as if assessing the situation. "What's the baby's name?" she asked Rebecca. "Daniel," Rebecca managed to say. He's 8 months old. Hi, Daniel, Lily said, speaking directly to the screaming infant.
I'm Lily. I know you're having a really hard time right now.
That's okay. It's okay to have hard times. There was something about the way she spoke, so calm and gentle and completely unafraid, that made even Rebecca feel slightly more at ease. Daniel was still crying, his little fists waving in the air, his face scrunched and red. But Lily didn't seem bothered by the noise at all. She just smiled at him and slowly reached into her backpack. Several passengers were craning their necks now, trying to see what was happening. The businessman had actually closed his laptop and turned in his seat to watch. The elderly couple was watching too. Even the flight attendant had paused her beverage service to observe. Okay, Daniel, Lily said softly, pulling out the light-up toy. Let me show you something really cool. And with that simple statement, something shifted in the air. Rebecca couldn't quite explain it, but it felt like the first moment of hope she'd had since boarding this plane. She watched this small child with her worn stuffed rabbit and her light-up toy, and for the first time in hours, she felt like maybe she wasn't completely alone anymore. Maybe, just maybe, help had arrived in the form of a 7-year-old girl in a yellow dress. Lily pressed the button on the light-up toy, and suddenly the cabin was filled with soft, twinkling lights. The toy projected little stars onto the seat in front of them, rotating slowly in shades of blue, pink, and yellow. A gentle melody played from the tiny speaker, barely audible over Daniel's cries, but there nonetheless. Daniel's screaming paused for just a fraction of a second. His red, tear-stained face turned slightly toward the lights. It wasn't much, but it was something. Lily noticed immediately. Do you see the pretty lights, Daniel? She said softly, moving the toy slowly back and forth. See how they dance? They're dancing just for you. Rebecca held her breath, afraid to hope. She had tried so many things over the past 2 hours. What could a 7-year-old possibly do that she hadn't already tried? But she was too exhausted to question it. She just watched as Lily worked her gentle magic. Daniel whimpered, still upset, but his eyes were tracking the lights now. Lily kept her movements slow and deliberate, never making any sudden gestures. She brought the toy a little closer, then pulled it back, letting Daniel's eyes follow the pattern. That's right, Lily encouraged him. You're watching the lights. You're doing so good, Daniel. She reached for her stuffed rabbit with her other hand. The rabbit had seen better days. One ear was slightly torn and the white fur had turned a bit gray from years of being loved. But there was something comforting about how worn it was, like it carried all the love it had ever received. This is Mr. Hoppy, Lily told Daniel, holding the rabbit where he could see it. He's been my friend for a very long time. He's really good at making people feel better. Do you want to meet him? Slowly, carefully, Lily made the rabbit hop closer to Daniel. She made soft little hopping sounds with her mouth and the rabbit bounced gently through the air. Despite himself, Daniel's crying started to quiet into hiccuping sobs. His eyes were fixed on the rabbit now, watching it move. Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face again, but these were different tears. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of disbelief that this was actually working. She didn't dare move or speak, afraid that any interruption might break whatever spell this little girl was weaving. Lily made Mr. Hoppy kiss Daniel's tiny hand with his soft nose. The baby's fingers, which had been clenched in tight fists, slowly started to open. One of his hands reached out toward the rabbit. His movements jerky and uncoordinated the way babies' movements are. He wants to touch Mr. Hoppy, Lily said with a smile, and she gently placed the rabbit in Daniel's grasp. The baby's fingers closed around the worn fur, and for the first time in over 2 hours he stopped crying completely. The silence was shocking. For a moment, nobody in the nearby rows seemed to breathe. The sudden absence of crying was almost as startling as the crying itself had been. Passengers who had been trying to ignore the situation now turned openly to look, unable to hide their amazement. But Lily wasn't done. She knew from her experience at her father's clinic that babies could start crying again, just as quickly as they stopped. She needed to keep Daniel engaged, keep his attention focused on something other than whatever had been bothering him. She started singing, her voice soft and sweet. It was a lullaby her mother used to sing to her when she was small. She didn't remember all the words perfectly, so she made up some parts, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the gentleness of her voice, the steady rhythm, the feeling of safety it conveyed. Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Lily's here to sing you lullabies. When the stars come out at night, everything will be all right. Daniel was staring at her now, his eyes wide and wet but no longer crying. He still held Mr. Hoppy in one hand, and occasionally he would wave the rabbit around or bring it to his mouth. Lily let him, not worried about the toy getting slobbery. That's what toys were for, after all. She continued to wave the light-up toy gently, creating patterns of light that danced across Daniel's vision. Then she started making the lights jump from place to place, playing a little game with him. Each time she moved the lights, she would make a soft boop sound and Daniel's eyes would follow. Boop. There it goes. Boop. Can you see it, Daniel? Boop. A small sound escaped from Daniel's mouth. Not a cry, but something else. Something that might have been the beginning of a laugh. Rebecca gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. Lily heard it too, and her smile grew even bigger. Did you like that? Let's do it again. Boop, boop, boop. This time Daniel definitely made a happy sound. It was small and gurgling, but it was unmistakably a laugh. The baby who had been screaming inconsolably just minutes ago was now giggling at lights and a stuffed rabbit. Lily reached out very slowly and gently touched Daniel's tiny hand. You're such a good baby, she told him. You were just having a hard time, weren't you? But it's okay now. Everything's okay. She glanced up at Rebecca and saw the mother's face was wet with tears. Are you okay? Lily asked with concern. Rebecca let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I'm more than okay. I don't know how you did that. I tried everything, and you just... Babies can tell when people are scared or worried, Lily explained, sounding wise beyond her 7 years. My daddy taught me that. When you're calm, they feel calmer too. And sometimes they just need someone new, you know? Like how sometimes when I'm sad, talking to someone who isn't daddy helps, even though daddy is the best. Rebecca laughed through her tears. This incredible little girl had not only calmed her baby, but was now making her feel better about the whole situation. She didn't feel like a failure anymore. She just felt grateful. Daniel was playing with Mr. Hoppy now, waving the rabbit around and making his own baby sounds. Lily continued to hold the light-up toy, but she wasn't even pressing the buttons anymore. Daniel seemed content just holding the rabbit and looking at Lily's smiling face. May I hold him for a little bit? Lily asked Rebecca. Sometimes babies like being held by kids because we're not as big and scary as grown-ups. Rebecca hesitated for only a second before nodding. Her arms were exhausted anyway, and this little girl had already proven she knew what she was doing. Carefully, she transferred Daniel into Lily's lap. Lily adjusted her position so she could support Daniel's head properly, something she'd learned from watching her father and the nurses at the hospital. Daniel settled into her small arms, still holding Mr. Hoppy, and looked up at Lily's face with curiosity. Hi there, Lily said to him. You're being so brave right now. Flying is hard, isn't it? All the loud noises and the weird feelings in your ears. But you're doing great. She started humming again, a different tune this time, while gently swaying back and forth. Daniel's eyelids started to droop. He was exhausted from all that crying, and now that he was finally calm, sleep was catching up with him quickly. Around them, the cabin had transformed. The tension that had been so thick was dissolving. Passengers who had been shooting Rebecca angry looks earlier were now watching the scene with softened expressions. Some were smiling. Some looked amazed. A few had pulled out their phones, probably wanting to capture this moment. But Lily's father caught their attention and shook his head politely. This wasn't about getting likes on social media. This was just about one person helping another. The businessman in seat 12C had been watching the entire thing. He picked up his phone and deleted the angry text he'd been composing about the terrible flight. Suddenly it seemed petty and mean. A child had shown more maturity and kindness than he had. The elderly woman Martha whispered something to her husband. This time her voice wasn't critical. That little girl is something special, she said. Did you see how she just knew what to do? Daniel's eyes finally closed completely. His breathing evened out into the deep, steady rhythm of sleep. He still held Mr. Hoppy clutched in his little fist, but otherwise he was completely relaxed, peaceful, like the past 2 hours of screaming had never happened. Lily looked up at Rebecca and smiled. He's sleeping now. Do you want me to give him back? Rebecca shook her head, wiping her eyes. Not yet. Rest your arms for a minute. You've done so much already. Just thank you. Thank you so much. For the next 30 minutes, Daniel slept peacefully in Lily's lap, while the little girl continued to hum softly and gently rock him. Rebecca watched in amazement. still unable to fully process what had just happened. Just an hour ago, she had been at her lowest point, feeling like the worst mother in the world, completely alone and helpless. And now, thanks to a 7-year-old stranger, her baby was sleeping peacefully and she felt like she could breathe again. When Daniel finally started to stir, Lily carefully handed him back to Rebecca. The baby's eyes opened slowly, and for a moment Rebecca held her breath, terrified that the crying would start all over again. But Daniel just looked around calmly, then nestled against his mother's chest with a small, contented sigh. "I think he's okay now," Lily said with confidence. "But if he starts getting upset again, I'm right here. You can come get me anytime." Rebecca hugged Daniel close and reached out with one hand to squeeze Lily's small hand. "I don't know how to thank you. I really don't. You have no idea what this means to me." "You don't have to thank me," Lily said simply. "That's what people do. We help each other." As Lily started to stand up to return to her seat, something unexpected happened. The businessman in seat 12C got up and walked toward them. Rebecca tensed automatically, expecting more criticism, but the man's face had completely changed. The irritation was gone, replaced by something that looked like embarrassment and regret. "Excuse me," he said quietly, looking at Rebecca. He was holding a bottle of water and a small bag of pretzels from his own snack supply. "I wanted to apologize. I was very unkind earlier. You were doing your best and I should have been more understanding. Please take these. You must be exhausted." Rebecca stared at him in shock. This was the same man who had been shooting her dirty looks, who had slammed his laptop shut in frustration, who had made her feel even worse about the situation. "Thank you," she managed to say, taking the water gratefully. She was actually incredibly thirsty. She'd been so focused on Daniel that she hadn't even thought about her own needs. The man nodded and returned to his seat, and as soon as he did, something seemed to shift in the entire cabin. It was like Lily's act of kindness had broken down a wall, and suddenly everyone was remembering their own humanity. Martha, the elderly woman who had made those harsh comments earlier, slowly made her way down the aisle. She was carrying a small package of tissues and a wrapped piece of butterscotch candy. "For the baby," she said, her voice much softer than before. "The candy might help if his ears start bothering him again on the descent. And dear, you keep those tissues. You look like you need them more than I do." She paused, looking uncomfortable. "I said some unkind things earlier. I'm sorry. My own children are grown now, and I'd forgotten how difficult babies can be. You're doing just fine." Rebecca felt fresh tears spring to her eyes, but these were good tears. "Thank you," she whispered. After Martha returned to her seat, the woman in the business dress approached. She looked sheepish as she held out her phone. "I have some baby games on here," she said. "Just some simple apps with colors and sounds. My sister's kids love them. You can borrow my phone if you think it would help keep him entertained for the rest of the flight." "That's very kind of you," Rebecca said, genuinely touched. She didn't take the phone because Daniel seemed content for now, but the offer itself meant everything. Even the young couple who had been complaining about their ruined movie time came over. The girlfriend was carrying her travel blanket. "This is really soft," she said, handing it to Rebecca. "Maybe the baby would like it. We're really sorry we weren't more understanding earlier." One by one, passengers found small ways to show kindness. Someone offered to hold Rebecca's water bottle while she adjusted Daniel's position. Another passenger gave her some crackers, in case the baby gets hungry. The teenage girl with the purple headphones walked past and smiled at Daniel, even stopping to wave at him for a moment before continuing to the bathroom. Patricia, the flight attendant, came by with an extra pillow and a warm smile. "You're doing great, Mom," she said. "And that little girl is something special, isn't she?" "She really is," Rebecca agreed, looking back at Lily, who had returned to her seat with her father. David had been watching the entire transformation of the cabin with quiet pride. His daughter had not only helped a mother and baby in distress, but she had somehow reminded every single person on this plane what it meant to be kind, to be compassionate, to choose understanding over judgment. "You did a wonderful thing, Lily," he told her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "I just helped a baby." "Daddy," Lily said like it was the most natural thing in the world. "That's what Mommy would have done." David felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Yes," he said softly. "That's exactly what she would have done. She'd be very proud of you right now." "I'm very proud of you." Lily smiled and leaned against her father's shoulder. Mr. Hoppy is with Daniel right now. That's okay, right? I think he needs Mr. Hoppy more than I do. David looked toward Rebecca's seat and saw that she had indeed kept the worn, stuffed rabbit. Daniel was holding it against his chest, occasionally bringing it to his mouth to chew on the ears. That's more than okay, honey. That was very generous of you. Can we visit them when we land? Lily asked. Just to make sure Daniel is still okay? If his mother doesn't mind, then yes, we can definitely check on them. The rest of the flight passed peacefully. Daniel stayed awake but calm, looking around at his surroundings with curiosity, occasionally making happy baby sounds that were such a stark contrast to the screaming from earlier, that some passengers actually laughed with relief when they heard them. Rebecca found herself in several conversations with nearby passengers. The businessman told her about his own kids, how they were teenagers now, but he remembered how hard the baby years were. Martha shared stories about her grandchildren and gave Rebecca some advice about dealing with ear pressure on flights. The young couple apologized again and showed Rebecca some photos from their vacation. It was amazing how different everything felt. The same people who had been judging her so harshly just an hour ago were now treating her with kindness and understanding. And it had all started with one little girl who chose compassion over criticism. When the pilot announced they were beginning their descent into Denver, Rebecca felt her anxiety spike again. Descending often bothered baby's ears even more than ascending. But she glanced back at Lily, who gave her an encouraging thumbs up, and somehow that made her feel like everything would be okay. Daniel did fuss a bit during the descent, but it was nothing like before. Rebecca nursed him, and that seemed to help with the ear pressure. Lily had walked back to check on them, and just her presence seemed to keep Daniel calmer. When the plane finally touched down and everyone started gathering their belongings, Rebecca found herself surrounded by well-wishers. People were saying goodbye to Daniel, waving at him, telling Rebecca what a beautiful baby he was. It was such a complete reversal from the hostile environment of just 2 hours ago that it felt almost surreal. As they prepared to exit the plane, David and Lily waited for Rebecca in the aisle. I know this is a bit forward, David said, pulling out a business card, but I'd love to stay in touch. Lily has been asking if she can make sure Daniel is okay, and honestly, I think what happened today was special. If you ever need anything or if you're ever in Boston, please reach out. Rebecca took the card with a trembling hand. She pulled out her phone. Can we exchange numbers? I want to send you photos of Daniel as he grows up, and I want him to know when he's older about the little girl who helped him when he needed it most. They exchanged information, taking a moment to snap a photo together. Lily was holding Daniel, both of them smiling at the camera while Rebecca stood beside them. It was a moment frozen in time, a reminder of the day when kindness changed everything. As they walked through the airport, Rebecca pushing Daniel in his stroller while he clutched Mr. Hoppy, several of the passengers from their flight went out of their way to say goodbye. The businessman waved from the distance. Martha stopped to give Rebecca a hug. The young couple wished her well at her sister's wedding. Rebecca's sister was waiting at baggage claim, and she immediately knew something significant had happened just by looking at Rebecca's face. Are you okay? She asked, hugging her sister tight. How was the flight? Rebecca laughed, and it felt good to laugh. It was the worst flight of my life and the best flight of my life, somehow both at the same time. I have so much to tell you. As she recounted the story to her sister, showing her the photo of Lily holding Daniel, Rebecca realized something important. She had started this journey feeling alone and terrified, convinced that the world was full of people who would judge her for things beyond her control. But that little girl in a yellow dress had reminded her and everyone on that plane that there was another way to be. There would always be difficult moments. There would always be times when things felt overwhelming and impossible. But there would also always be helpers. There would always be people like Lily, who chose kindness without hesitation, who saw someone struggling and simply asked, "May I help?" That evening, as Rebecca was getting Daniel ready for bed in her hotel room, her phone buzzed with a text. It was from David with a photo attached. The photo showed Lily in her pajamas, waving at the camera. The text read, "Lily wanted you to know she's thinking about Daniel and hoping he's having sweet dreams. She said to tell you that you're a great mommy. From one parent to another, she's absolutely right. You handled today with grace and strength. Wishing you all the best." Rebecca showed the photo to Daniel, who was already drowsy. See that? she whispered to her baby. That's your friend Lily. She's an angel, that one. A real-life angel. As Daniel's eyes closed for the night, still holding Mr. Hoppy close, Rebecca sent up a silent thank you to the universe for putting Lily in their path. What could have been just a nightmare story about a terrible flight had become something else entirely. It had become a story about compassion, about second chances, about the incredible difference one person can make. Years later, Rebecca would tell Daniel this story over and over. About the flight where he cried for 2 hours straight, and how everyone was angry, until a little girl in a yellow dress reminded an entire plane full of people what it meant to be human. She would tell him about Mr. Hoppy, which would become his most treasured possession, and she would tell him about Lily, who would become a lifelong friend, someone they visited every summer, someone who taught them both that the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest ripples. But for now, in this quiet hotel room in Denver, Rebecca simply held her sleeping baby and felt grateful. Grateful for the struggle because it led to the help. Grateful for the judgment because it made the kindness shine brighter. And most of all, grateful for little girls in yellow dresses who see someone in need and simply ask, "May I help?" Because that, Rebecca realized, is how miracles happen. One small act of compassion at a time.